Stop.
Yang, of course.
You've gotten slow.
Sifu is a game that can be described in 2 words, deceptively simple. You play as the son or daughter of a martial arts schoolmaster vowing for revenge after the place was slaughtered by Yang and his crew. Its combat is surprisingly deep, weaving various kung fu movies as inspiration, with tons of ways to take on enemies that are challenging yet rewarding. It also has a story that combines with the gameplay in such a natural way, telling a story that can only be told through this specific kind of game. The level design is perfectly executed as well, making the levels feel unique and irreplaceable. Sifu is a must-play for any brawler enthusiast, as its genius combat system is something that just cannot be found anywhere else. I need to mention why the combat works so well in this game. It's a very challenging game that makes you earn your victories. It starts simple enough, but quickly starts to demand more focus and skill into the game, which reinforces the fact that in this game, you are a glass cannon. You are given a lot of defensive options, but past that, your health is very minimal. But, however, there is a mechanic to make up for the fact that you have such little health, which is the revival mechanic. In this game, you are basically given a magic medallion that allows you to revive, but at a cost. Every time you revive, you age. You start at age 20 and you die at age 70. The more you die, the more you age, obviously enough, but it is to an exponential factor. So it is very easy to basically get put in the ground if you can't progress in this game. This game is very clearly inspired by various kung fu / action movies. For example, if you've ever seen Old Boy, this hallway should look pretty familiar. Although it seems like a simple reference, it gets flipped on its head when you consider the fact that this question is no longer, how is he going to handle this? It's, fuck, I have to do this? Which completely flips that scenario on its head, right? Instead of this being a plot obstacle, it's now a gameplay obstacle where you have to learn how to adapt or you will die. The level design is actually really interesting. Like, for each area that you go to, it perfectly explains the difficulty of that area. The reason why the first area is considered a bit more of a tutorial thing is because you're effectively fighting junkies, right? You see around the area, there's a lot of green and there's purple to kind of contrast that occasionally to show the like purple powder that they're peddling in the area, right? Because obviously everyone's a junkie, right, in that area. And it really does kind of help also add some motivation as to why you want to kill them as well. It's not just a revenge thing, right? This guy's been peddling drugs to people for about 8 years, so that's definitely something he's got to go into the grave for, you know? Another thing I want to go into is the detective board. Honestly, it's a really interesting mechanic that you'd think wouldn't be here, but it surprisingly meshes well with all the stuff that's available, right? Because it effectively gives you a bunch of tips about the game, it tells you about some of the enemy types, and it helps expand like the world, all in an optional manner that, although is non-intrusive, you would be kind of missing out if you didn't look into it at least a little bit, right? Another thing, I'm not going to go into spoilers, the only thing I'm going to mention is that there is one item in the first level that is actually tied to something that you can do optionally in the final level, because like it connects to some of the areas, right? Sometimes you might need to backtrack to a different level with that item that you have to get access to something, which is honestly really cool because it just helps like add more replayability to it. And it's not something that you need to beat the game. It's something that you could entirely miss, which is just another like, yet again, it's simply deceptive, right? It's something that you could easily miss, but it has so much to give if you give it the time and you put some understanding into it. As a side note, the detective board also does show you some keys, which is more tied to like skipping certain sections of the level. You might think that's a little bit weird, but the whole point of the game, or at least like the difficulty of it, is staying as young as you can, right? Having some of these items that you can earn throughout the level so that when you do it again, you can skip some of the sections that you might have had more trouble with to either go straight to the boss or to a later section, really does help a lot at keeping your character young. And it also helps alleviate some of the frustrations with the game because it might start getting repetitive, you know, where you have to go through the same sections over and over again. But not only does the shortcut areas have their own sections, which is obviously significantly shorter than the like doing the main path, but also just kind of helps get to the fights that you really need to focus on instead of having to put up with some of the easier fights that might throw you off a little bit. It's just something I really like about the game as well. Alright, let me talk about the boss for this level specifically. There is one thing I'm going to start off with. You are not the only person that has magic, right? For each of the bosses, they have a different kind of magic, and as you can kind of see, his thing is plants, right? He makes a bunch of plants. He's the guy that makes all the drugs, because obviously enough, if he can just grow plants with his bare hands, it's not like, you know, he has to go out and get stuff for it. Generally, the motivation for going after Fajar is a bit more personal compared to some of the other members or the other bosses, with the obvious exception being Yang. Basically, Fajar kills you at the start of the game, right? That's how the game kind of does initially show off the medallion mechanic in the cutscene. And it is kind of interesting how they make that choice. He's also mute as well. He doesn't talk a single time in the game. His first phase is a bit more like rushdown, kicks, punches, occasional like jump punches or kicks, right? But in his second phase, he goes all out. I mean, obviously, that's easy enough. You can see him literally disappear into the trees like it's Vietnam. He's a lot more difficult because he brings his machete, right? It's very heavy hitting, obviously enough. And he is a pretty interesting boss. He occasionally like disappears in the trees again to go out for like a sneak attack, and getting him is pretty satisfying, and it sets the tone of the game pretty well because there's no messing around. It's straight to the point, and he drops, or at least Sifu drops probably my favorite line in the whole game.
I have spent 8 long years preparing for this.
Alright, let me talk about Arena Mode for a second. It's a free DLC. You get it when you get the game, so that's pretty good. There is one very big caveat before I go into this. Although you can play this at the very start of the game, don't touch this until you've beaten the game. The difficulty for these challenges are honestly insane. You generally have to be comfortable enough to kind of beat the entire game to take on these challenges, because they honestly just get really difficult. You know how I mentioned before, deceptively simple. If I had to describe this arena mode in 2 words, it would be absolute mastery. This mode, if you want to beat all of it, to just completely just go through all the challenges and see what it has to offer, you have to absolutely master all the game's mechanics, which you know, it is an interesting challenge, right? And considering that it's not like story focused, you don't feel like you're missing out if you tap out, because like you're not missing some narrative hook where, oh, is he gonna do this or do that, right? The whole point of it is to do combat challenges and to, you know, have fun. So that's pretty good. As IGN put it,
on the other side of that vicious learning curve, though, is one of the most impressive beat-em-ups I've ever played, with excellent level design, fantastic music, and, once it was all over, a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that few other video games can provide.
Would I recommend Sifu? Yes, undoubtedly. Generally, the game is unique and it's relatively one of a kind, right? Obviously, there's a bunch of beat-em-ups, but Sifu does it like nobody else. The combat is just, it's fluid, it works, and it makes you feel unstoppable until, well, you get stopped. The enemies, they're difficult, but they are rewarding to beat. The levels, they're just unforgettable. It's just something that sticks with you long after you beat the game. Story's pretty good too. Works really well, considering the fact that it combines the gameplay elements and kind of mixes them with the story. So even if it is a a pretty basic story, it feels so much better because of the fact that the gameplay also takes you kind of on that similar journey, so there's no feeling of disconnect. The game is $40, like basic price tag, which is cheaper than most AAA games. And it occasionally goes on sale for about like maybe 30 bucks, depending on which place you get it. And occasionally it does go on sale for like 50% off, which is like just 20 bucks. I absolutely recommend getting this game.